Hi everyone. In this demo I'm going to show you how to do an inseam pocket. Alright, so what we have here is our skirt back, here center back, the waistline, side seam, okay? And then we have our skirt front, center front, waistline, side seam, and then we have our pocket lining, okay? And there's two of these, okay? Everything's marked with the right side and wrong side. The right side has lines drawn on them, and the wrong side has nothing. Okay, so let's go ahead and take the pocket lining and put that aside for a second and start with our skirt front and back. Okay, we're just going to do 1/2 the skirt. It's the same on both sides. All right, so you'll notice here on the pattern that there's these notches. Okay, here and here, here and here, and we have coordinating notches on our lining. Okay, here and here. That is where the actual pocket opening is going to be. All right. So it's just something to note when we're sewing this. All right. So let's go ahead and take our two skirt pieces. We're gonna go to the sewing machine. We're not gonna bother sewing the darts in because we're just focused on how to sew in the pocket right now. But we'll stay stitch our waistlines. That's a good habit to get into because you don't want that stretching on you or anything. And then we'll go ahead and sew our side seam. But something we need to remember is that we need to have an opening here. Okay, but we are actually going to go ahead at first and sew our whole side seam closed, and you'll see why we do that in just a second. All right, so let's go ahead to the machine and stay stitch our waistlines. All right, we're at the machine here. We're going to go ahead and stay stitch our waistline. We'll do it at 1/2 inch. There's the front, and we'll do the back as well. There we go. Okay, so now that we've stay stitched both of our waistlines, let's go ahead and put right sides together. And what we're going to do is we're going to line up our waistline and we're going to line up the notches here. Okay, because that's where our opening is for our pocket. And we're going to stitch the whole side seam. All right, so we're going to start here at the waist and we're going to back tack and we're going to stitch down until we get to that first notch, and then we'll back tack, and then we're going to lengthen our stitches and stitch through the pocket opening. Okay, we're lengthening them because it'll be easier to take those stitches out later. And then we'll go back to our normal construction stitch at the second notch, back tack, and then get to the end of back tack. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So my regular construction stitch right now. And we're at that first notch, let's back tack. And now I'm going to lengthen my stitches and continue stitching from that first notch until I get to the second one right there. I'm going to go back to my regular construction stitch and continue stitching. I'm going to back tack now and continue stitching down until I get to the hem. And there we go. Alright, so let's go back to the cutting table. Alright, so there you can see I have my regular stitch. I've back tacked, stitched, back tack at that first notch. Then I have a longer stitch going through what will be the pocket opening. And then I switch back to my construction stitch, back tacked, and continue stitching to the end and back tack. Alright, so now let's go ahead and we're going to press open this seam. And use my pressing ham to do this because it's on a curve. It'll give me a nicer press. And once our pocket's in, that's when we'll open up that what will be the pocket opening. All right, there we are. So now we've pressed that seam open. We've essentially just sewed the side seam of our skirt. Okay, see what it looks like here. All right, so we've sewed a side seam of that skirt. So now we want to attach our pocket lining. Okay, so we'll grab our pocket linings. Okay, here's the pocket linings. Here's the right side. Okay, if we think about this, our hand is going to enter through the side seam and go into, if we open up the pocket lining, it will eventually go into our pocket lining. Okay, the right side of the lining is what we want to have against our hand. Okay, so then that means we have to stitch the side of the pocket lining to the side seam allowance. Okay, and we're going to put right sides together. So here is my pocket lining. All right, notice I have my 2 notches here that match up with these 2 notches. These 2 notches here match up with these 2 notches. Okay, you can see on my seam allowance, the side seam allowance of my skirt, my markings. Okay, that's the right side of the seam allowance. All right, so what I'm going to do is take the right side of my pocket lining and line it up with the right side of my seam allowance, and I'm going to line up those 2 notches and pin it together. Like so. All right, and then once I've pinned there, I'll probably put one up at the waist here. And then one down here. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip everything out of the way. So I just have my lining and my seam allowance I've pinned it to. And we're going to stitch this on at 1/4 inch right on that seam allowance. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, we're at the machine, and I'll actually flip this over. So this is, so you can see right here, here's my pocket lining, the wrong side of it. I'll flip it over so we can see the seam allowance where we're stitching. Might make it a little easier. I'm going to start right at the bottom where the pocket lining is, and I'm going to stitch this on at 1/4 inch. We have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which we've already sewn. So we're just going to take 1/4 inch of that from the cut edge. Here we go. Back tack beginning and end. There we are. Okay, so it's been stitched on now at 1/4 inch. Now we're going to do the same thing on this other side. So if I open this up, that's what it looks like right now. I'm going to take this, and I'm putting the side seam of my pocket lining where those 2 notches are. I'm going to flip it over so the right side of this is against the right side of this side seam, and I'm going to line up these 2 notches. Pin it all together. I'm just going to isolate that pocket lining and that seam allowance so everything else is out of the way. Makes it easier to pin and sew. Pin up those 2 notches first. Make sure everything's lined up perfectly. And then let's put a pin down here at the bottom. And a pin up here at the waist. Alright, so now we can sew this on. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Make sure everything is flipped out of the way when you stitch this. You don't want to catch anything. The only thing you should be sewing is the pocket lining to the seam allowance that we're attaching it to. And there we go. Okay, let's go back to the cutting table for a minute. Alright, so here it is. Let's open it up. And you can see what this looks like on the inside. All right, and again, these are just sewn. This one's sewn to this side of the seam allowance, and this one to this side of the seam allowance. All right, let's take our, let's press this now. I'm actually going to flip this right over, and I just have one side, my pocket lining and seam allowance, and I'll just press that seam allowance towards my pocket lining. It's only a 1/4 of an inch, it's very small. You could try pressing it open if you wanted to, but really just pressing it. We'll do the same thing to the other pocket lining. Yeah, just pressing it towards the pocket lining is fine. There we go. All right, so we've pressed it. Now we need to sew our pocket lining together. So what we're going to do is flip right sides together of our pocket lining. And so I'm going to take my pocket lining, both of these, I'm going to flip the rest of the skirt out of the way. So here's the front and back of the skirt, here's both my pocket linings. And we're going to pin these together so that we can sew them together. Just a few pins. You just need to pin like every 3 to 4 inches to hold it in place. Okay. Alright, so there's that's pinned together. We're going to stitch down, come across, and we're going to stitch right up into our side seam stitching line. Okay, so we'll stitch this at a 1/2 inch and actually come in and stitch right to the original stitching. Okay, we're not going to go past that side seam stitching line, we're going to stop right at it. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, here we are. We're going to go ahead and sew right down from the top all the way to side seam. Back tack beginning and end. Now, when I'm about a 1/2 inch away from the bottom of this, I'm going to go ahead and put my needle down, lift my foot up, and then I can just turn it like so, put my foot back down, and continue stitching. And I want to make sure that my seam allowance is all facing the correct way. It should be facing towards the pocket lining. Okay, so I was just checking on the bottom. And I'm going to stitch right to my side seam stitching. And right there. And I'll back tack. There we go. And you can see I didn't go past the stitching line on my side seam. I stopped right there. Alright, so let's go ahead and clip this. So there it is stitched. We now want to open it up, or actually before we open it up, we actually want to clip in here. Because what happens is, think about, we want our pocket to go towards our front. This is our front. This is our back. Okay. We want our pocket to go in towards our front. Alright. Right now it's pulling all my seam allowance from here up in that direction. So what I'm going to do is just clip up in there all the way to my stitching line. Like so. So that this can lay flat like so. Alright. Now what I'm going to do, I've pressed this towards the front, or have that going to the front. I'm just going to stitch it in place right along the waistline. So it holds the pocket there, that pocket lining in place, and it will stay there, and it won't be moving around on me before I go. Eventually you'll put a waistband on here, or a bodice, or a facing or something. So let's just stitch that in place real quick. Okay, so we're just going to tack this in place. We can even just do it at a 1/4 of an inch. Again, it's just to hold it in place so it doesn't move around on you. And that's good. now we're ready to open up the pocket opening. So let's do that. Okay, let's open up our pocket opening. If we look and see where our notches are, well, actually, we can do it from the inside actually. So here's one notch right here, and I'm just going to cut one thread there. There we go. Come down to my other notch, clip, pull that thread, and now I can just pull out these stitches pretty easily. There we go. Same thing in here. Let's pull out that thread so it's not moving around on me. Go. And now that pocket is open and you get a hand in there. Okay, and this is what it looks like on the inside. I mean, this is curved, so it's kind of hard to show it and make it look nice when it's not on a body or something, but you can get the idea. All right, and there, the hand would go right in there. Okay, this is just a demo, so it's a little small. I have big hands too. So, all right, so there it is. That is the inseam pocket. Very nice little detail, a way to hide a pocket if you don't want it showing or anything. Okay, all right, good luck everyone.